Hey guys, it's Jay and you're listening to the Walk With Me podcast. This is episode 21 and today it's a pretty quiet day in the neighborhood. It looks like it could start pouring rain at any moment. I'm going to take a chance anyways and go on a longer walk today to a nature preserve near my house. So I'll be walking along the road. You're going to hear some cars coming by here and there. And I hope you've got your walking shoes on and you're out and about. And I always love to encourage you to send me a picture with the hashtag the Walk With Me podcast so I can see where you are and what you're up to. So most of you know I'm recording these episodes in advance, something that sometimes in business is called bulk creation, so that I can be done with all of our free content by July 1st of 2019, because I'm due with a baby girl in September of 2019, and we want to use that time, July up until September when I go on maternity leave, to focus on our launch of my signature program, Mentor Masterclass. And so that means I'm recording this episode in June, and you're going to receive this particular episode, I think actually in September. So by the time you get this episode, I should be pretty close to having my baby. And it's June. A lot of fun stuff happens for me in June. So it's my birthday coming up. I'm going to be 35 on June 25th. And we also just celebrated our anniversary. So I have been married to my husband Brent for 7 years, and we've been together for 12 years. Now, I don't claim to be a relationship expert, but I am a coach, and I have studied tons of modalities for the mind, body, and spirit. And I also have worked with many women intimately in my signature coach training mentor masterclass for the past few years. And while I'm not working with them directly on their relationship, I've learned it's actually impossible to help a woman have a successful coaching career if she is not feeling grounded, successful, happy in her relationships and in her partnerships. So there's no way for me to help my women excel in their career if we don't end up talking about their relationships. And for my married women, a lot of the time their partner is a huge part of whether or not they have success or failure as a coach. In fact, it begins from the very moment I talk to women when they apply to join Mentor Masterclass. A lot of their decision around whether they can even take this leap in their life to become a life coach happens to do with conversations with their partners. And I'll hear from women a lot, I need to talk to my husband, or I need to talk to my wife. And what I've learned is that the other big common thing that happens throughout Mentor Masterclass, working with these women for a year, is when they enroll, they go through such transformation in this program, because it's not only a life coach training program, it's also a deep dive into their own personal development and healing. And every modality that they learn about, be it health, relationships, motivation, life purpose, identity changes, working with the archetypes, inner and outer game techniques, we're applying all of this coaching to them and their life first. And they grow exponentially in a year and change so much and become a new and more empowered version of themselves. And this journey requires bringing your partner on board if it's to go successful. And a lot of the times what I see with women in spiritual or personal development communities is they complain that their husband is not, or their partner is not evolving at the same rate that they are, is not having the same consciousness, the same devotion to their personal development that they are having. And they'll use this as a point of frustration and negative emotion. And I'm just going to jump right to one of the things that I know to be true about this. And that is that sometimes women who have a problem with being a lone warrior, or women who've ever had any kind of trauma in their life, oftentimes they have issues with intimacy. And it seems like an easy out to use the positive work that they're doing in their life to grow a business, to heal themselves, to do better, to be better, to achieve exponential growth and success. They then see it as an out for intimacy with their partner if they can say, I'm doing all this work on myself, but my partner isn't. And oftentimes what's actually true is that their partner is available and doing the work, and there's actually a fear of intimacy that needs to be addressed. Let me also say that this is not always the case. It is true that sometimes when we start to dive deeper into ourselves and uncover who we truly are and our unlimited potential, and we make big changes to step into this, it is possible that we haven't chosen an aligned partner. And I also find it to be an opportunity if you've been in a long-term committed relationship that has lasted, chances are you've got some good soul chemistry and a contract there. And what I believe is that our partners, especially true for me with Brent, are our greatest mirrors. They are always going to be a reflection of our deepest fears, our blocks, our beliefs that are not so good about ourselves. And I think this is the gift of a committed relationship, especially when you're in a committed monogamous relationship with one person. Some of the gifts that emerge from that are, it becomes a deeper teaching ground, a platform for the greatest healing. And so it's funny that some women will actually label their husbands or this relationship to be the reason why they can't grow further, and actually it's the exact thing that you might need to dig into in order to reach the next evolution of love and a life experience that you really want to have. So I wanted to talk about relationships today. I know a lot of the time when we take a walk by ourselves and get out in nature, if we live with our partners, it's because we're trying to get away from them. And so this is a good episode for reflection, but more importantly, you know I love to share tools and techniques. And I want you to leave today, our walk, feeling like you have a tool for deepening in intimacy and partnership with your lover. And I have this belief too that the relationships that are meant to last a lifetime, like soul partner relationships, the ones that don't end, the reason they don't end, if you think about, we meet people every day. We meet people in the elevator on the way to the doctor's office. We meet people walking their dogs down the street. We meet people online. And there are relationships that last a minute, and there are relationships that last years. And I believe the relationships that last years, or that come back around, are created to be our teachers. And when we no longer have something to teach that person, or they no longer have something to teach us that our soul wants to learn in this lifetime, then we part ways. And we know and we feel when that time has come. But there's a difference when you are going through a negative time with someone or a time of conflict, and that being still a beautiful lesson for you to hold and have. And I think one of our greatest problems in relationships is that we have this idea that a good marriage, a good relationship, a good partnership never has negativity or conflict. And it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, real, long-lasting soul partnership relationships have mostly conflict and a lot of feelings and emotions to process. But we commonly think that conflict in a relationship is a sign that the relationship is doomed. And we avoid conflict like our worst nightmares. And we have really an avoidant way of thinking about negative emotions, which are any emotions that are anger, sadness, fear, disgust, contempt. A lot of our negativity toward both conflict and negative emotions is the reason why we struggle to feel grateful for, happy with, aligned with, well equipped in our partnerships. And let's talk about conflict first. So first I want to tell you guys about a life-changing decision that Brent and I made that I can't believe we followed through on, because we had signed up for this workshop it's called the Gottman Workshop, and it's by a couple who created it, John Gottman and Julie Gottman, and they run them all around the world. And I highly encourage you to try going to one time. Well, we had enrolled in one in December, and I was super excited about it because just since having our daughter, our relationship challenges increased a lot. And they say that's really normal. You're getting less sleep. Your whole life changes from being about each other to figuring out parenthood. And for Brent and I, we had a really long honeymoon phase. So I think for like the first 3 years of our relationship, we were just in that giddy, like it could do nothing wrong, loved being with each other, never left each other's side, just super honeymoon phase that lasted a lot longer than most of my friends. And I think, and then I was one of those women that had the story that I started doing so much personal development, going to retreats, taking every program under the sun, and my identity changed so quickly over the course of 2 years, which happened right about the time that we got married. And then we had Violet, and so we really needed to catch up on some resourceful tools, took this workshop. And so I'm going to share with you something. Oh, by the way, the workshop, which we committed to, my mother died the day we were supposed to leave is when I found out my mother had passed away. And it was this huge decision about whether I could handle going to do this relationship workshop and spending a weekend deep diving into our relationship while just finding out that my mother had passed. And it turned out we decided to go. We had already booked the hotels in the city. We had already paid for the course. And honestly, it felt like a beautiful way to be in deep communication with Brent, while going through something that I knew was going to be hard for him to hold me in, and hard for me to lean into support. And so we went to this workshop, and one of the main things that stood out to me was this conversation that we had around problems and solving conflict and having fights in relationship. And so that's the tool I want to teach you today, because we've been using that now since December, and we did a lot of work with it inside the workshop, and it really shifted our relationship dynamic. So much so that I feel like this story I've had about Brent's inability to hold me on a spiritual level or in a deep way because of all the tools and techniques and things I've learned that he's not devoting his life to learning, I've gotten to see and understand exactly how we limit our partners, because a lot of times we have these expectations that in order, they have to do things like us, that in order for Brent to have the right training, he would need to do the things that I do. And what's true is he does a lot to evolve himself spiritually, emotionally, physically, in his own way. And they're just not the way that I would do it. And I found a deeper level of trust and intimacy and faced some of the edges from my own childhood trauma and my own resistance and lone warriorness to be more feminine, to fall into his arms and to see and create trust in a new way. So let's get into it, because I think if you want those things in your partnership, like I said, I'm not a relationship expert, but I do know a lot of techniques that work for relationship building and for you. I've worked with a lot of women around their partnerships. I want my women to have successful, happy relationships, and that's part of what we work toward in our coaching. Even though they're technically hiring me to be their business coach, we go deep dive into relationships, and oftentimes I get to know their husbands really well and their families, and that's all a part of a feminine business model, is that it's holistic, and you can't create that without knowing and involving your partner and your children if you have them. So these views are what we need to work with. This view that conflict and that negative emotion equals a bad relationship. And you got to think about it like this. Instead of expecting communication to be like good communication to be the normal thing, we should actually expect miscommunication to be the normal thing in relationships. Because what's true is incidents and regrettable things are said, and regrettable incidents happen in life consistently in partnership, regularly. And we need a way of dealing with these inevitable moments of life when we hurt our partner or when our partner hurts us. And anytime we have a disagreement, a challenging time communicating, a conflict in our partnership, we have to view it as an opportunity to learn how to love our partner better. And we have to see it as a time to teach our partner more about us and how to love us better. And this is why I say this happens in my program, because women will lean into sisterhood, open their hearts, and they will lean into their journals and pour their heart out and change, but they are not comfortable sharing what they're really doing, what they're really going through. And oftentimes when I lead a retreat, I spend hours preparing my women to integrate and go back to their partners, because so many retreats I went to didn't talk about this, and you lose everything that you learned. Same with programs. If people in your life who you see every day don't learn the changes you've gone through, and you don't learn how to teach them who you are, you stop creating opportunities to come together. You start growing apart, and it's not because you weren't meant to be, or you didn't have a beautiful love or soul capable partnership. It's because of that lone warrior, isolated way that we're taught in society, not to open our hearts and trust. Conflict is an opportunity to learn how to love our partner better and to teach them how to love us. And we need conflict to grow in a relationship. Just like I talk about triggers and how they were great in previous episodes for sisterhood. And these moments of being out of sync are really opportunities for connection in any relationship. And the goal in conflict is understanding our partner. And just think about it like this. How often do you think that, what proportion of time do you think you're together with your partner and you are emotionally available? Meaning your heart is open, you're ready to listen with an open heart without getting defensive, and you have no other distractions that are more important than being one-to-one, open-hearted, face-to-face, really emotionally available to your partner. I think most of us can agree that 50% of the time would be generous, right? That if we said 50% of the time we're in that state, that would be a generous offering. And now think about this. How often, what is the probability that both people in a relationship are both emotionally available and ready to listen with open hearts without getting defensive? How often do you think that you happen to sync up on the same day with an open heart? It is so rare, like 25% of the time. That means 75% of the time we are dealing with one person not being emotionally available and not having that ripe, fertile ground that we need to grow closer and solve our problems. So that's the biggest thing to notice, is to be able to create those spaces with your partner and to figure out what gets you both there is half of the challenge, is being able to create the space to communicate and open your heart. And we want to adopt this attitude that there's always two points of view, that we're both valid and right, and we both have our own perceptions, and that's why we need to be available to listen and have an open heart. Because without it, we're just sitting there being defensive and pointless, and then creating more conflict and more negative emotions, which makes us feel that we aren't in the right partnership. And when we think about conflict in relationship, it's important to really be able to discern if we have a solvable problem or a perpetual problem. Because it's like 70% of relationship conflict is about perpetual problems. We all have them if we're in a relationship. All couples, they're really grounded in the fundamental differences that any two people would ever face when they try to come together and do life together. And I want us, as women doing great work in the world, to have the kind of relationship that does not leave one another in pain, because we need to come home to our partners to rejuvenate us, to enliven us so that we can do greater work in the world. And this requires not just your partner to open their heart, but you to open your heart. And often the times, opening the heart does not feel easy. If it feels like I approach my partnership with an open heart, and it's not a challenge for you, and it doesn't feel kind of awkward, and you don't have to nudge yourself, you're probably lying, and you're probably not really, your heart is not as open as it needs to be to your partner. And definitely if you're one of those people saying, but I've done all this work and they can't meet me there, you're having judgment and your heart is closed. And I want us to have the kind of relationships that when one person is upset, the other is communicating. And we're saying to each other, when you're in pain, the world stops until we figure out what you need. And that we adopt that kind of partnership together. And that's where Brent and I have gotten to after 12 years of being together, that we're able to now, especially as a result of coaching and some of the workshops we did, particularly this Gottman workshop, learning how to solve those perpetual problems that become gridlocked. It's the gridlocked problems that make us suffer the most because we don't understand them. And without understanding them, we have no resourcefulness. So they just keep coming back and distracting us and limiting us and holding us back in life. And one of the things that I've learned is that being in a committed relationship, any kind of committed relationship, is really just about choosing the set of problems you feel most aligned working with. So I really want you to hear that. There's no relationship you're going to enter in life, no sisterhood, with no mentor, with no lover, that's truly a life-changing, long-term relationship that is not going to involve choosing the set of problems that you two want to choose to work out together in this lifetime. What I mean by that is you can have passionate, amazing sex with one lover, and you could have a problem syncing up sexually with another. What you get to decide is what set of problems are you willing to devote and open your heart to working on. And that is how you know if you have chosen the right partner or not. it really comes down to, can you handle dealing with this set of problems together or not? But if you think that you're going to leave a relationship and enter one where you don't have problems, that's where you're in trouble. Because you're always going to find, after that honeymoon phase ends, and all the honeymoon phase is when you just say, I accept everything about you. Nothing you could do could make me angry or wrong or be bad, because I just only see the good in you. And eventually, in all relationships, that wears off, and we come to a point where we have different values, where one person values something so much in their life and you value something so much in your life and in the world, and those things are different. There's no person you're going to meet that's going to share 100% of the same values as you. And that's where gridlock problems occur. So I want you to leave today's walk understanding and being able to identify the difference between the different problems that we have show up in our partnerships. So the first one is a solvable problem. Solvable problems can be about house cleaning, they can be about disciplining the kids, it could be about sex, it could be about in-laws. It's like the exact topics that could be perpetual problems for a different couple. But a solvable problem within a relationship is about something situational. The conflict is simply about that topic without a deeper meaning behind the position. And a solution can be found and maintained. Now, a perpetual problem are problems that center on either fundamental differences in your two personalities or fundamental differences in your lifestyle needs. All couples have perpetual problems. It's not just you. The issues can be about the exact same topics as for, like, one couple might find that topic to be solvable, but another couple might find it to be a perpetual problem. These are the problems that a couple will return to over and over and over again. And then there's a gridlock perpetual problem. Gridlock perpetual problems are perpetual problems that have been mishandled, and they've been turned into something quite uncomfortable. And when a couple tries to discuss a gridlocked issue, it can feel like you're just spinning your wheels and getting nowhere. And the nature of something being in gridlock is that there's hidden things underneath the issue that you're not aware of. And a component of relationship gridlock is that usually both people feel criticized and rejected and unaccepted by their partner. And how you can tell when a perpetual problem becomes gridlocked is that basically you feel rejected by your partner and they feel rejected by you. And you have the same conversation over and over and over again and you make no headway. And, you know, people become really entrenched in their values and in their positions. And these conversations go nowhere. And they lead to frustration and hurt. And there's little humor left. There's no amusement. There's no affection when you're talking about this particular problem. And the gridlock gets worse over time. And it leads people to, like, vilify one another and separate from one another. And over time, this vilification, making your partner wrong and making them the villain against you, leads people to become more entrenched in their values and in the positions, and more polarized and more extreme. And then what happens is just this leads to emotional disengagement. And then you have two people who are feeling completely separate from each other and have no acceptance. And so here's the difference, okay? There are limits of acceptance in a relationship. And those things are that no one should have to accept abuse of any kind, emotional, physical, verbal. No one has to accept violence. No one deserves to be hit. And no one has to accept betrayals of your relationship contract that are too much for you to ever work with or forgive. No one. But outside of those things, there really is an opportunity to learn how to fight better. And that's what I really want to talk about today. It's a little bit of a longer walk to go into this, but I think it's worth it because I want to give you some tools to think about how to have better conflict, how to be in negative situations with your partner, and shift your whole view of that being an indication that you're in a shitty relationship and life sucks, and open up to it being an invitation for more intimacy and an open heart and you being supported. And so this will really help because just like all of you, I've had fights where I say the wrong thing, where I do the wrong thing, and I end up hurting Brent. And he has done the same to me. And one of the most important tools to have in any relationship is know how to process a fight in order to make the discussion better next time. And so here's step 1, feelings. You have to share how you felt. First of all, you never do this in the fight. This all happens after the fight because you need to be out of defensive mode, and you need to do this when you can open your heart and when your partner can open their heart. And that's where you want to get to, that open-hearted, listening, secure space where problems can actually be solved. So, feelings. Share how you felt. Do not say why you felt that way. Avoid commenting on your partner's feelings and just say, I felt defensive. I felt not listened to. I felt angry. I felt sad. I felt misunderstood. I felt criticized. And you both want to first go through each of these steps and then let the other person go through. So step 2, same person shares. Now, there's realities, right? Describe your reality. And for this part, you want to take turns. So summarize and validate at least what you heard from your partner, part of your partner's reality. So you want to take time describing your perceptions. So your own reality of what happened during the regrettable fight. Describe yourself and your perception. Don't describe your partner. Avoid attack and blame. Talk about what you might have needed from your partner and just describe, like a reporter giving a blow-by-blow description. And then what you want to have your partner do and what you'll do for them is say, here's what I heard you saying. Rather than you said, say, this is what I heard you say. So your partner's, you can summarize and then validate your partner's reality by saying something like, it makes sense to me how you saw this and what your perceptions and needs were. And I heard you say that you didn't feel listened to, and it makes sense to me why you would see that. I get it. So you want to validate it and even use empathy maybe by saying something like, and I can see why this upset you. Remember when I said having an open heart doesn't always feel easy? That's how you might know that it's open. This is what I'm talking about. When you're in conversations like this, checking yourself to be less judgmental and to not villainize your partner and to even love and accept them even in this negative conflict is what it means to have an open heart. And I cannot tell you how healing for your love this is. So, do both partners feel understood? If you got to share your reality, you took turns, you summarized and invalidated your partner, at least part of your partner's reality, then you can move on. If not, you have to ask, what do I need to know to understand what you experienced in this better? And after summarizing and validating, ask your partner, did I get it? Is there anything else? And when you both feel understood and seen, then you can move on to step 3, which is triggers. So triggers are about, again, sharing and validating. So you want to share what experience or memories you've had that might have escalated the interaction and the stories of why these each are triggers for you. So you want to think back through like your early history, or take it out of the hands of your partner and ask, do you remember a story or an instance that triggered similar feelings for you? And I want you to tell this story of this past moment to your partner, and don't give up until they do it for you. Ask them to think about it and go deep, and both of you go through this vulnerable process of letting your partner know so they can be more sensitive to where these things come from. And I guarantee you, you have them. So an example of triggers is like, I felt judged, and I'm very sensitive to that. Or I felt excluded, or criticized, or flooded, or ashamed, or lonely, or disrespected, or powerless, or out of control, or a lack of trust toward you. And I'm very sensitive to that. Why? Where does that come from? Where's the first incident where that occurred? And share that with your partner so they understand that this is not just from them, but this is a life trigger. It's going to help your partner to understand you. And then you want to validate, does any part of your partner's trigger and story make sense to you? Let them know now if there's something that makes more sense to you that didn't before. This kind of communication will change the way that this problem feels anytime it comes up in the future. And that is such a gift for you and to you, because one of the greatest issues is that this has been a gridlock issue that you keep coming up against and that you've shut down and disconnected around. And that's what you want to solve. Which takes us into step 4, responsibility. And that's really acknowledging your contribution. Share how you set yourself up and what you regret, and apologize. You want to acknowledge your own role in contributing to the fight or this regrettable thing that keeps happening. And under ideal conditions, you might have done better at talking about the issue. So what set you up? Share how you set yourself up to get into this conflict. And really, here are some ideas. Like, I'd been very stressed and irritable that day. I hadn't expressed much appreciation toward you in a long time. I'd taken you for granted. I'd been overly sensitive. I'd been overly critical. I hadn't shared very much of what was going on inside my inner world. I hadn't been emotionally available. I'd been turned away more, or I'd been getting easily upset, or I'd been depressed lately and didn't tell you, or I'd had a chip on my shoulder about this thing that I just kept holding on to, or I hadn't been very affectionate and physical, or I hadn't been a very good listener, or I hadn't asked for what I needed, or I'd been feeling a bit like a martyr, or I'd been feeling like I just needed to be alone. And then you want to share regrets and contributions. Specifically, what do you regret? And specifically, what was your contribution to this fight? And what do you wish to apologize for? So, I'm sorry that I overreacted, or I was really grumpy, or I was defensive, or I was so negative, or I attacked you, or I didn't listen to you, or I wasn't respectful, or I was shut down. And if you accept your partner's apology, say so. If not, say what you still need. So you see, you're going through each of these steps back and forth one at a time, and then responding to each other. And this is the part that's so important, because a lot of the times when we come to a conversation, or we're in a fight, what's happened is the biggest thing we want in relationship is acceptance. We just want to know, right? That our lover accepts us for who we are. That no matter how shitty, bitchy, challenging, emotional we are, our man is going to wrap his arms around us and see through it all and love us. And they want the same thing from us. And what we take away first is our acceptance, and we replace it with judgment. And when we aren't accepting our partner and telling them, acknowledging them and showing them appreciation and emotional availability, that's where fighting becomes consistent and gridlock problems are just unsolvable because there's no appreciation. And I guarantee you, if you look for it in your partnership, there's always something to appreciate. Even if I'm so pissed at Brent because he's emotionally unavailable or distant or whatever it might be, I can still say, I noticed that you poured me a cup of coffee this morning. Thank you. Or I really noticed how you are such a good father to Violet and got her ready for school, and I appreciate you taking that time for our daughter. Or I noticed how you looked at me with love in the hallway, and because, most of the time I'm mad, so I didn't respond. But we notice these things. There's things to appreciate. And if we can start off opening our hearts from that place before any fight and then go into these, we are in solid ground for not only a kick-ass relationship, but also some pretty sweet lovemaking later on, because these are the things that cause you to feel polarity and attraction to your partner. And so, step 5, as you know, I'm a coach, so I always like to end things with action, and that is how these conversations should end too. You want to plan together one way that each of you can make it better next time. And you want to take turns sharing one thing your partner can do to make a discussion of this issue better next time. And it's important to remain calm as you do this. And then while it's still your turn, share one thing you can do to make it better next time. And what happens is when we learn to have this kind of psychological relationship to solving conflict, then we get to those gridlock problems. And I'll do a future episode on that. And an example of a gridlock problem is, I'll share one from Brent and I. So those are the ones that get down to values that probably are not going to ever change. That you really have to get to that point where you say, like, you're not trying to change your partner and accept that thing about them. But the challenge is that it's a value that you might not necessarily be able to ever change in this lifetime. So here's an example for Brent and I. I believe it's so important to be open and honest publicly. I believe sharing deeper insights, like into your relationship, are important. And I'm very open and vulnerable because I think when I do that, these secret things that exist in families and in people that limit us and make us feel less than or keep us stuck in traumas are eliminated when we recognize that we're not alone, when we recognize other people feel this, when we recognize and talk about it openly, especially in a way where there's problem solving available. And this comes for me with everything from how much money I make to my relationships to my personal feelings about grief. I mean, you guys have experienced it in this podcast, and definitely if we've worked together. And Brent values privacy, and he values not telling people the numbers in the bank account and the personal issues and these things. And when we did our workshop, we came up against this because he can be really upset by that, and I can be really upset by being held back from doing my work in the world way I want it to be, and he can be really upset about having our personal life being experienced by strangers. And so we have to come up with a way to accept each other and to even love each other for these differences, which wasn't happening. There was a lot of judgment before we could sit down and use this exercise and seeing where the triggers come from and coming up with a plan of how we can do better. And so I'm even realizing before I share this episode, because I've ended up talking so much about our partnership, I have to get approval from my partner, and we have a way of doing that, and that he may be uncomfortable, but there are some guidelines. I can go so far as to be as open about what I want But when it involves him, we have some guidelines, right? And so we've created that structure together. Does it mean that I'm going to become a private person and not do my work in the world? No. Does it mean that I'm just allowed to say everything and anything that I want about our privacy? No. We have to find that compromise, and we were only able to get there by accepting each other, looking deeper into where those triggers come from, respecting and understanding each other, loving each other for our differences, while still owning that we have these different values. And that's just one of many that we all have in partnership. So I thought, with it being our anniversary and me feeling pretty awesome in my relationship right now, so in love, not really experiencing a lot of gridlock problems right now, just feeling connected, resourceful. Of course, that doesn't mean life is perfect. We still get annoyed with each other, but things are really good right now. So I thought it's a really good time to do an episode on relationships to celebrate our 7-year anniversary of being married, 12 years together. We're going to invite a new baby girl in 3 months into our lives, which will probably shake things up all over again. And it's just an important thing for us to talk about in sisterhood and on the podcast, because all this work you're doing to evolve your identity, whether you have a lover or not, this is what you'll deal with when you have one. And the same idea around negativity and conflict can be applied to any relationship in your life. And we need strong, solid relationships so that we feel the safety and comfort to fly and to soar and to take big leaps in our business and our work in the world, and to feel good while we're undergoing so much healing to evolve. So thank you for bringing this relationship conversation in. I want to know more about your relationship. So on the blog, in the description notes of today's episode, you'll find a link to the blog. That is where you can sign up to be on my newsletter. I share behind the scenes resources, tools, stories, tips, access to content and programs that I don't share anywhere else online, even on the podcast. So you want to make sure you're subscribed at JeannineYoder.com, especially since the podcast series only has 2 more episodes after this one, and we'll be pausing for a while to focus on some other content and free resources. So if you're on my newsletter, JeannineYoder.com, you'll make sure to be available in the know of what we're going to be offering outside of the podcast, other free content resources that I usually run live through September to January. And then we'll be launching a new podcast series in the new year. So we still got a couple episodes left. Let me know what you thought about this one. Also, I'm thinking of doing a couples workshop in 2020. I want to know how many of you would like to come work with me and your lover in person. So if that interests you, shoot a comment on the blog or come on over to my Instagram, Jeannine Yoder, and let me know, hey, Jay, I really want you to do that couples workshop. And we can work on some of these things together in person, maybe virtually. Let me know what you like. Well, thanks for walking with me today. Can't wait till next week. Make sure to go on over to the blog and let me know what was most resonant with you today. And we'll see you next week on Wednesday for another sweet walk. Bye, guys.